I am your host. This is George Miller. I'm here with Career Lab Wednesday almost every week of the year. I jump in here on LinkedIn Live and on YouTube to help answer questions about career development. That can be anything from resume building, interviewing, managing conversations, talking with your boss, talking with your team. Most of what I will bring in has to do with emotional intelligence. That's my expertise. But I've been in the career development space for a while, so sometimes I also can help out with LinkedIn tactics and tricks with resumes and that kind of thing. So I invite any question career related. There's a few ways you can engage. I love it when you jump in directly on Zoom, but do know that this is being live streamed. So if you want to remain anonymous, totally get it. What you want to do then is just type your questions into the chat. If you're here on Zoom and you want to remain anonymous, then just type your questions into the chat. And for those of you who are viewing on LinkedIn or on YouTube, I encourage you to type your questions and comments into the comment section. I will do my best to stay on point with you. If I'm going in one direction and you're wanting something else, just let me know. And I will, I'll course correct. So I'll be talking about today's topic in a little bit, but I want to make sure that everybody knows that you can ask any question, whatever is most present on your heart. That's the most important thing. You don't have to try to fit it into the context of the topic today. You are invited to ask any question. I enjoy the spontaneity. It's part of why I do this. I like getting questions from left field and seeing if I'm able to sort and navigate this stuff. So as we are digging in here, I'll be sharing about this topic and absolutely invite you to listen in. But if at any moment you have a question, feel free to come off mute and ask it, or feel free to type into the chat. Any question is welcomed. So we are at a turning point in the United States and therefore globally, given that we are the most powerful country that perhaps has ever existed. And so there's a lot of changes happening. We've got AI as well on top of all of that. And so many businesses are being affected. And what do we do about that? So how do we stay centered, clear, and connected when a lot of change is going on? And this is way harder than what I think. I'm not going to give any quick, simple solutions. I might give some tactics that you can work on over time, but there is no quick fix to this. So the number one thing that happens is we start looking outside of ourselves and trying to make others happy. That is a common thing for a lot of people that I talk to, and there's a lot of ways that makes sense. So if I'm managing a team, then of course I need to be aware of what's happening in that team and how people are feeling and how our relationship is developing. That's absolutely essential. However, if I am not in touch with myself and my feelings, I can only go so far in those interactions. I will only have so much of an impact in my communications. So as challenges, as changes, challenges, etc., are ramping up, what ends up being most important is my connection to myself. Will I make decisions, or will I keep pushing things off and waiting for the right time? I'm doing quotes here, that will probably never arrive. And so just the first fundamental thing, when there's a lot of change happening, it's incredibly important to get to know yourself more, to to get grounded with who you are and what you want. That way, what you're saying to people has more of an impact. So change is a part of life. Change is certainly part of America. We, you know, I mean, even just the founding of this country was an innovation. And so we go through huge innovations every 80 years, sort of like, you know, when the people who are when people are leaving the planet, and another group of people are kind of coming into themselves and their leadership in the world. This is not the first time this has happened. So to look at the difference between reactive leadership and active leadership. Now, there's a bind in this, which is it's nice to say like, oh, you don't want to be reactive. That's an easy thing to say. But when it comes down to it, reactivity is part of how we all develop. And so it doesn't just work for me to meditate on what I want and pretend that that's going to happen. It's going to be more effective for me to be aware of the ways that I am reactive, the ways that I do push back against things, and for me to shine the light on that and use that instead of pretend like I'm not. So that's a big difference I want to throw out here, is that I think a lot of times we can come up with things that sound nice and, you know, in theory are the way to work, but each of us is a process of emergence happening right now. And so to look at what is really going on for us. So I'm going to share a story to underline this. So one of my clients is working to own their reactivity. You know, they are have been successful in the financial world. They have been successful with card playing. You know, they've got a lot going for them, but what's really important to them now is the legacy that they're leaving, as well as really deepening the relationships with their business partners that they have now. So they have had pointed out to them things like, you know, when I bring something up with you, you just try to fix it. And you don't really hear what's going on for me. And you end up doing a lot of extra work sometimes. It's just unnecessary. And they're kind of recognizing that. And so they started off with me saying, you know, how do I want to get over my reactivity. I want to get over how I work harder, not smarter. And what we actually have them doing is playing with their reactivity. So when their business partner points something out to them, they're now embracing it and saying, and they'll double down on it, but in a playful way, and say like, no, well, I know what's right, and you just have to listen to me, and then everything's going to work out perfectly, which is obviously not true. So they'll say stuff like that, and they're owning where they're at developmentally instead of pretending that they're somewhere else and then internally criticizing themselves for not being a more advanced human being. And so this is what I'm talking about in these times of change. You know, really embracing who I am right now is going to be the most effective leadership move I can make. And I'm curious if anybody who's listening in has any thoughts or questions about that. What would you want to throw in here? Do you have a question coming up for you about a relationship a business relationship that you have right now, what do you got going on for you? So I'll move into another thing, into decision making under stress. So being alive, stress is part of being alive. Our ancestors were not the ones who chilled out. Our ancestors were the ones who were proactive, were reactive, reacted to things sometimes too strongly. And yes, that has its own problems. But if you really look at it, it's reacting to things that so often has us creating more safety. So,
Hey, George.
yes, hey, Nick, how's it going? I see you're coming off mute. Let me know if you've got a question.
Yeah, I'd love to dig in further. So I didn't mean to cut off your
Oh,
segue
no,
your
no. I
topic, but
love it. I love it. I totally invite you to cut me off.
and you mentioned your client was trying to own the reactivity of their personality and dealing with whatever they're dealing with in their business. What type of practices or repetitions were they maybe doing with you on the front end to develop that? And because I was thinking of that example of how did they get to the point where they were owning their reactivity? And so that's my curiosity.
Oh, that's a great question. So, yeah, first of all, this stuff we're mostly unconscious to. I've been uh, digging into this kind of work for over 14 years. Um, and I am still largely unconscious of myself. So that's a great question, Nick. So I'll walk us into it. And the point that I want to make is that for whatever reason, where we're at evolutionarily, we are emerging. We're in process. I'm in process. So if I become like 3% more conscious, that's a huge deal. If I become just a little more aware of myself and how I am reactive, that makes a huge difference in my day, my month, my year, and etc. So the way that my client, that I believe he was able to be conscious of his reactivity, was by paying attention to his feelings. And so again, this is complex. It's not, I'm not going to be able to give you anything super simple. Paying attention to feelings and being aware of drama. Another way of saying that is blame, shame, and justification. So a critical thing is that if I understand that I'm spending a lot of energy resisting feeling my own feelings, I don't want to feel afraid. I don't want to feel hurt. I don't want to feel angry. I don't want to feel sad. And truth be told, I don't even want to feel that much joy, because even feeling a lot of joy is kind of scary. And this is worldwide. I've never had a client who, once they started looking at their core feelings, was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I just want the good ones. I don't want the bad ones. And even just saying that, the bad ones, is now suppressing fear, hurt, anger, sadness. And then in my moment to moment interactions that I'm having with people, I avoid those feelings. And so I create drama to avoid those feelings. I do not want to feel the anxiety that comes with life. And so I will subtly blame other people, or I will kind of shame myself. Youngest child, grew up in a Mennonite family. And there's a lot of Catholics too who relate to me, So it's like, we're good at confessing, but that's often besides the point. And the real underlying strategy is I'm shaming myself or confessing to avoid the anxiety of the moment, or to avoid the potential sadness of a moment. And this is so micro. I mean, I can look at almost any interaction. I was in a meeting this morning, and I could point out many ways that I subtly blamed and subtly justified things. And my intent behind that was to avoid my own discomfort. And this is the state of humanity right now. And when I start recognizing that process, then I can take meaningful risks. And so the client that I'm sharing about, so he's more in touch with, oh yeah, you know what, I often feel hurt in a communication with my business partner because I don't, it's like I don't think they really appreciate me. And I end up kind of, I'll then go to overwork to like show I'm valuable. Yeah. And then I'll make sort of unconscious comments that are reactive to like, well, I don't know why you didn't ask that sooner, or why I did that already. And right underneath that is the avoidance of fear and hurt. And it shows up as, you know, aggression, or, you know, frustration is a less threatening word than anger. And so it shows up, and people are kind of like, oh yeah, what's wrong with so-and-so today? And so once I'm aware of this process in my life, and that, you know, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be working this. It's just the basics of, I think it's the basics of emotional and social intelligence. And then I can start really playing around with choosing to be reactive, choosing to enjoy my own defensiveness. And once I start doing that, then it's going to be a lot easier for me to say, oh, actually, I can see ways to assert myself now, to be assertive as opposed to defensive. But if I label defensive as bad, then I'm hiding it from myself. And everybody else around me may be aware that I'm a defensive prick, except me. So when I can claim it and have some fun with it, I will inherently become more proactive and assertive. So Nick, great question. Thanks for asking that. Let me know if that's helpful. Let me know if I'm on point with you, if I went off in some direction that wasn't useful.
No, that was great. And I think what I took away is like really building a foundation of self-awareness and being able to recognize emotions and clarifying your values, and where you can tap into that further to then, you know, build that emotional agility, if you will, and own that reactiveness to your point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with the values. I think a lot of people put out a lot of highfalutin values that are hard to implement. And so I'm working on aliveness. I'm starting with real basic stuff in life, and you know, with the vision that I'm moving towards you know, values like, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I want to be more loving. Well, being more loving is quite a project. And so anyway, Nick, I'm curious if what your thoughts are, what you're working on in terms of being more aware, and what values you're choosing to live by.
Yeah, I think just from a starter pack standpoint, I think I'm trying to be better at it. It's kind of funny. You're sometimes not as aware of your self-awareness, if that makes sense. And so I think starting there and building that will help me allow to create a better roadmap of clarifying those values for myself, and then being able to recognize emotions based off that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a looking at myself that is incredibly important. So I'm in the science of creative intelligence course right now, and I've been doing work with Maharishi International University, and I've been having a lot of fun with it because I love David Lynch and Twin Peaks, and the main concept is to shine the light on areas of myself and areas of society and areas of relationship that I want to avoid, that other people want to avoid. And just by shining the light of consciousness on things, then people come up with creative solutions. People, when I bring awareness to an area, then for lack of a better word at the moment, kind of I came up with a good word, then spontaneously healing or connection or creative ideas are generated when I am putting awareness to areas. So that's a huge thing in coaching. A lot of what I do is ask questions to bring awareness to areas that people are working on in their lives. So I love this, and what you said too, Nick, about becoming more aware. Another point that I want to make in this conversation of staying centered when leading through change is to be aware of basic stuff like my body. So noticing the sensations happening in my chest, in my stomach, and I'm not gonna, the majority, it usually is more with guys. A lot of times when I'm coaching a guy, he is not aware of sensations in his chest or stomach for a little bit. It takes practice. It takes the choosing to have more awareness. I remember one person saying after a couple months they were like, George, I feel hurt. Like my heart hurts. My wife said something and my feelings were really hurt. And it hurts. And I'm happy. I'm happy that I'm feeling hurt about this. It's kind of weird. And then they started making the connections, things like, and it's so cool. My kids are connecting with me more now. And my staff is sharing more information with me. As I have become more in touch with my feelings, I'm realizing that I'm not batting away stuff that my staff is trying to share with me. And, they're not as on their toes. I didn't even realize. I've always been saying, oh, no, I'm an open book. It's one thing to say it. It's another thing to be it. And so learning how to access my own body more and more and open myself up to more and more feelings. This is why breath work and a lot of yoga stuff is really great, because it just brings you into your body, and anything you can do to remove judgments and just be with the experience of what's happening will automatically start to light you up. This is one reason why I love taking clients into ice water, because you're going to have a reaction. Your body is going to communicate stuff to you. And so there are somatic practices that you can do that will help you as a leader. The number of leaders that I've worked with who have an intentional practice before going into a big meeting to ground themselves, to take some deep breaths, to let themselves feel the anxiety that they feel going into a meeting, instead of BSing themselves and saying like, I've got it handled. Oh no, I'm prepared enough. This is all good. I'm in good shape and I'm going to make sure my agenda is clear here. But to say, whoa, wait a minute. God, I've got to, like, really trusting my team is scary. I feel anxiety thinking about trusting my team. Okay, well, I've done what I can do in my preparation. I think I've prepared everybody else as much as I can, as much as is responsible. And now I'm going to let go in ways. And I'm going to catch where I want to micromanage. And I'm going to choose to shut up and breathe. And so then life opens in all kinds of new ways when I choose to be more in my body, choose to feel what's happening there. And that then will allow me to practice basic things like trust. So I think an underlined way to say this is emotional agility. That starts with the basics of me allowing myself more access to my emotions. You know, when I talked about men, I want to bring in thing because, you know, everybody's different. I work with some guys who are quite in touch with their emotions, and a tendency then is to blame themselves for things, is to overwork and people please, to try to make everybody else, like, if I make everybody else happy around me first, then maybe I can take a breath. And that's true for a lot of women I work with. It's like, you know, being in touch with the feelings is not as much of the work, but it's the changing my beliefs and my stories that I have about my emotions, and saying, oh, cool, it's good that I'm really in touch with feeling hurt. And I can see somebody else when they feel hurt, and my knee-jerk response is to try to rescue them. Well, that's not, most of the time, that's not really serving them. I'm actually trying to avoid my own hurt. It's like, I think if I can help somebody else not feel hurt, that then somehow that's going to soothe some of my wounds. And the screwed up thing about, well, that's a harsh statement. The ineffective thing about it is, but it also helpful to be aware of, is that when I rescue somebody from a thing, it does actually do a little bit for me. I get a little of an emotional hit from that in a way, in an enjoyable way. Nothing wrong with it. But if that's how I'm living my life, if that's my orientation, then there's a lot of issues with it. I will not be as effective, and I will also never really get the nourishment that I could get. It's sort of like I'm living vicariously through somebody else's good feelings. And that's a huge issue, especially I find that a lot in healthcare and with teachers. I have worked with a number of nurses over the years, and physicians, dentists, you know, who are real, they're in a helping profession, and the tendency to be rescuing is big, and then they get all out of sorts because their needs are not being met, but they've basically trained everybody around them to not meet their needs, and so they have to start taking responsibility for that. And so then, oh, here's a fun one. We were talking about being defensive. Well, for a fun assignment, a fun exercise to practice for people who are kind of more in the rescuing space, is to have them be drama queens. just to start to recognize how much drama they're in and to celebrate it and to really like make a point of like, oh, woe is me. Nobody, I've done all these things to help these people and nobody cares about me. Oh, this is impossible. And to start playing with that instead of avoiding that and pretending like that's not happening. And another important thing about all this is we're so trained in our life. I mean, by the time we're 20, we're pretty set in our ways. And the older we get, the more set in our ways we can become. And there's that saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, that's said for a lot of good reasons. There's a lot of neuroscience behind this. But the coolest part about neuroscience and all of this is that we have neuroplasticity. Even anybody at any point, if you're breathing, you are capable of altering your neural pathways. Now, it becomes, there will be pain with it. This is the research from Jack Mesereau, Adult Learning, who said, formation is childhood, transformation is adulthood. But a price that we pay as adults in transformation is that there will be pain because I'm breaking neural pathways to reform new ones. And that's one of the things I say to my clients is, look, there's three main prices you pay with me: time, money, and the bigger one is discomfort. And so that's going to happen. As somebody develops as a leader, it can be helpful to understand that, oh yeah, every time I level up, I'm going to be incredibly afraid all over again. I'm going to have my feelings hurt all over again in profound ways. I'm going to question myself to the core. I'm going to say things like, I can't do this. I'm going to catch those thoughts. That's all going to happen. This is going to be a painful process. But I choose to make it meaningful. I choose to find value in the discomfort. I choose to find really important information in the discomfort. The more that I embrace my fear, the more I am capable of anticipating danger. The more I allow myself to be present with dangers, the more I will anticipate that. And the more I will say, oh, I'm going to speak up. And I'm going to, if nobody else is doing this, well, then I'm going to take that meaningful risk. And I think in a lot of ways, we are there big time in our country. If we look back, I'm a millennial. I'm on the right at the cusp, and I've been taking encouragement from the GI generation, known as, at that time, they were the greatest generation, the folks coming out of World War II and the Great Depression, and they banded together and created a lot of our national parks. Well, that was Teddy Roosevelt, but they built on it, and really set a strong foundation that helped the United States get to where we are now. And now we have crumbling things. But I take some inspiration that I'm in a generation that can mirror the last time that a lot of changes happened. And so I'm seeing it as my duty to continue taking meaningful risks in conversations with people, to help myself emerge and to help them emerge. So much so I've made a career out of it. And I want to underline too a point. I'll bring my parents into this, because when I was talking about can't teach old dogs new tricks, it's not true. We can, but again, it is painful. It's uncomfortable. So I had a conversation with my mother a couple weeks ago, and I basically said something like, I was hurt and upset by the way you communicated, made this communication. As your son, it would have meant a lot for me for you to show more anger and upset around this family matter. And, it was really cool, because my mom said, thanks for bringing that up. I really appreciate you telling me that. I am working on saying more of the hard things that need to be said. She said, I avoided challenging conversations a lot of my life, and it's one of the biggest regrets I have. And so it means a lot to me that you're bringing that up with me. And right there, she didn't even have to agree with me. That's not, I didn't like, maybe that's nice if she agrees with me, but the more important thing was the acknowledgement of me. And that is, anybody can do that at any point in life. It takes intention, and it takes it takes skill, but the most important thing is the intention behind it. So I hope that's inspirational. Certainly is for me. And I've been talking now, oh my goodness, I've been going for a while here. Well, I'm going to throw a few things in. Thanks everybody who's listening in. There's a few ways you can engage with me. I love it when you type your questions into the comments or chat, or love it when you come off mute and just let me know. I appreciate you doing that today, Nick. If you want, you can set up a one-to-one with me. There's a link to 15 minutes. We'll talk 15, 20 minutes. Sometimes somebody's able to get some clarity just in that time and say, wow, okay, yeah, I just needed to talk this through, and I have more internal sense of direction with this. And then sometimes it's a bigger project, and we can look at a coaching relationship together. So there's that way that you can engage with me. Another thing is you can do the quick personality assessment. This one is geared towards you being more aware of other people's personality styles. So there's a one that you do, but then there's a video that talks about how to recognize other personality styles and some strategies to communicate more effectively with other personality styles. And this is a big deal, because it's like what we've been talking about today. For me to communicate with a different personality style, I'm uncomfortable. And so I have to allow that discomfort to happen. I have to recognize my own anxiety and say, okay, yeah, cool, that's right. I'm feeling afraid because I'm essentially speaking another language now. It's okay that I feel afraid. That's me feeling afraid right now actually is helping me connect more with this person who speaks a different personality language than I do. And so there's a emotional intelligence factor to this. And I have things on YouTube. I wish that I could fund an entire YouTube training channel. I'm working on it bit by bit. But given that I'm meeting with clients throughout the week and networking and all of that, I'm only putting so much time into this thing. But check out the YouTube channel. There are helpful resources in there. And I just wish that it could be a lot more. Look for the video on the drama triangle and on emotional intelligence, 2 recorded webinars that are the foundation of the coaching that I do with people, is being more aware of drama and being more aware of emotions. So there's some helpful tools for you. I will be back next week. I'm double checking that I'm traveling. Yeah, I'll be back next week. So I encourage you to come on back, come on in with questions. I love questions about leadership development, relationship development. One of the biggest things that people don't do is reach out, is connect with people in their network, is connect with people they're working with. It's one of the biggest gaps, is just making meaningful contact with the people around you. So when somebody has a challenge with their boss or with their team, digging in on the unconscious level and bringing that to consciousness is what I love doing. Great, good to hear that you're finding this helpful. I'll be signing off here in a moment, unless anybody else has any questions, anything that you want support on. Again, doesn't have to be about this topic. You're welcome to ask any question, anything from resumes. What I like about resumes is they're a pain in the butt. Maybe they're not for you, but for me they are. They're not as resumes and interviewing were not things that I was good at. I would avoid them, and what I have found in working with resumes and interviewing is that there's a lot of opportunity for growth and development in there. A resume is just a hard look at who I am in black and white. And I have worked with a lot of people who had resume builders, and I did not think that they really represented the person well. And so somebody, as you're looking at your resume, if you're in that process, you putting in the hard work to it is worth it, and will help set you up for your interviews. In interviewing, the key thing is that you don't talk too much, is that you stay with the anxiety instead of trying to push it off by talking too much. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for joining in. Thanks for your questions. And I look forward to being in touch.